The Galactic Council's war room hummed with nervous energy as holographic displays painted the air in shades of blue and amber. Representatives from 12 different species clustered around the central tactical table, their varied forms creating an alien rainbow of scales, fur, and chitinous shells. At the head of the assembly stood Admiral Zethkar, his four arms gesticulating wildly as he outlined their desperate situation. "The Void Hunters have broken through our outer defenses," the Crothry Admiral announced, his mandibles clicking with anxiety. "Three-star systems have gone dark in the past rotation. Our fleets are being systematically destroyed." Murmurs of concern rippled through the gathered beings. The insectoid, hive-mind representative's compound eyes flickered rapidly, processing countless thoughts simultaneously. The crystalline resonance chimed in harmonious discord, their mineral bodies vibrating with worry. Even the stoic Ferrum, beings of living metal, showed stress patterns in their electromagnetic fields. "How many ships have we lost?" asked Commander Volterra of the Aquatic Collective, her gill slits fluttering nervously. Admiral Zethkar's primary eyes dimmed. 47 capital ships, 300 destroyers, and over 800 support vessels. The Void Hunters seemed to anticipate our every move. The room fell into a heavy silence. For centuries, the Galactic Council had maintained peace through superior technology and coordinated military might. The Void Hunters, a nomadic species from the galactic rim, had always been considered a minor threat. Their ships were crude, their tactics barbaric. Yet somehow they were winning. "Perhaps we should consider evacuation protocols," suggested the ethereal Lumina representative, its form flickering between dimensions. "Retreat to the core worlds and establish a stronger defensive perimeter." "Retreat," General Thok of the Ursine Confederation growled, his massive frame trembling with indignation. "We are the Galactic Council. We do not flee from raiders and pirates." "These are not simple raiders," Admiral Zethkar corrected grimly. "Intelligence reports suggest the Void Hunters possess technology we don't understand. Their ships phase in and out of normal space, striking without warning. Our sensors can barely track them." The debate continued for hours, voices rising and falling in a cacophony of alien languages and universal translators. Strategies were proposed and discarded, each seeming more desperate than the last. The Council's military doctrine, refined over millennia, appeared useless against this new enemy. It was then that the chamber's secondary entrance hissed open, drawing every eye to the figure that entered. The being was tall and bipedal, with pale skin and strange hair that seemed to change color in different light. Most remarkably, it possessed only 2 arms and 2 legs, a design that many species considered primitively inefficient. "Human," Admiral Zethkar acknowledged with barely concealed disdain. "I was not aware your species had been invited to this strategic session." The human, identified by his uniform as Captain Marcus Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force, approached the tactical display with confident strides. His species had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel and had been granted provisional membership in the Council just 5 standard years ago. Most established species viewed humans as curious newcomers, technologically backward but amusing in their enthusiasm. "My ship intercepted your emergency broadcast," Captain Chun replied calmly, his eyes scanning the holographic battle reports. "When I saw the tactical data, I requested permission to observe. The Council approved my presence under the military consultation protocol." Several representatives exchanged glances that clearly communicated their thoughts. What could this primitive species possibly contribute to their crisis? Captain Chin studied the displays for long minutes, his expression growing more thoughtful with each passing moment. The alien representatives resumed their debate, largely ignoring the human's presence. Plans were proposed to retreat to heavily fortified positions, to develop new shield technologies, to negotiate with the Void Hunters for terms. "Your formation patterns," Captain Chun said suddenly, his voice cutting through the discussions. The room gradually fell quiet, as beings turned to look at him. In every engagement, your fleets maintain the same configuration. Standard Council battle doctrine, correct? Admiral Zickers Mandibles deutscht implicitly. Of course, our formations have proven effective for over 3,000 years. They maximize defensive coverage while maintaining offensive capabilities. And your ships, the human continued, pointing to the tactical display. They're arranged in spherical defensive clusters, with capital ships at the center and smaller vessels forming protective shells. Very elegant. It is the most efficient configuration, Commander Valterra stated proudly. Each ship's defensive fields overlap with its neighbors, creating a nearly impenetrable barrier. Captain Chun nodded slowly, then manipulated the holographic controls to replay the most recent battle. The display showed Council fleets arranged in their traditional formations, perfect spheres of technological might. Then came the Void Hunters, their crude-looking ships appearing seemingly from nowhere, striking with devastating effectiveness. "I've been watching these engagement records," the human said, his tone remaining conversational. "The Void Hunters always attack the same way. They target the junction points where your defensive fields overlap." "Impossible," General Thok rumbled. "Those junction points are the strongest parts of our formations. Multiple overlapping shields make them virtually indestructible." "That's exactly the problem," Captain Chen replied, and something in his voice made the entire room pay closer attention. "You're thinking about this all wrong." He manipulated the display again, highlighting specific points in the battle recordings. "Look at the energy patterns when the Void Hunters attack. They're not trying to break through your shields. They're using your own defensive energy against you." The assembled beings leaned forward, studying the data with renewed interest. The humans' analysis revealed something that their own tactical computers had somehow missed. Those junction points where your shields overlap. Captain Chun continued. "They create resonance patterns. The Void Hunters have learned to match those frequencies and amplify them. Your own defensive systems become weapons that tear your formations apart from within." The room fell completely silent as the implications sank in. Their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. Admiral Zethkar's voice was barely a whisper. "How did you see this? Our finest tactical minds, our most advanced computers." Captain Chin shrugged, a gesture that looked alien to most of the beings present. "Sometimes being an outsider helps. You've been using the same tactics for millennia because they worked, but you never had to face an enemy who specifically adapted to exploit them." "Then what do you suggest?" Commander Valterra asked, her earlier pride replaced by genuine curiosity. The human smiled, an expression that translated poorly across species, but somehow conveyed confidence nonetheless. "Well, that depends. Are you willing to try something completely different? Something that goes against everything your military doctrine teaches?" The representatives looked at each other, then back at the primitive human who had just identified the flaw that their greatest minds had missed. "We're listening," Admiral Zethkar said finally. Captain Chin's smile widened. "Good. But first, I need to ask you something important." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Why are your warships vulnerable here?" And in that moment, everything changed. The question hung in the air like a physical presence, demanding an answer that none of the assembled beings seemed prepared to give. Captain Chin watched their faces, reading the confusion and growing unease that his simple question had provoked. "I don't understand," Admiral Zethkar finally managed, his mandibles clicking nervously. "Vulnerable how? Our ships represent the pinnacle of galactic technology. Each vessel is equipped with quantum steel hulls, plasma barriers, and defensive systems that have protected the Council for millennia." Captain Chin walked around the tactical display, his movement drawing every eye in the room. "That's not what I'm asking. Your ships are individually powerful, yes. But why do you fight in formations at all? Why cluster them together like this?" He gestured to the holographic representation of a typical Council battle group. Dozens of ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns, their defensive fields overlapping in complex mathematical harmonies. Commander Valterra's gill slits fluttered as she processed the question. "For protection, Obviously, isolated ships are vulnerable to concentrated enemy fire. Our formations provide mutual support and overlapping defensive coverage. Exactly, Captain Shin nodded. You group your ships together because individually they can be overwhelmed. But here's what I don't understand. If your technology is so advanced, why do your ships need protection from each other at all? The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't the quiet of confusion, but the stillness of minds grappling with a fundamental assumption they'd never questioned. General Thok was the first to speak, his voice uncertain. Because that's how space warfare works. Has always worked. Unity provides strength. Does it? Captain Shin asked quietly. Or, does it provide a target? The human manipulated the holographic display, calling up schematics of Council warships. The vessels were marvels of engineering, sleek, elegant designs that incorporated technologies from dozens of species. Energy coursed through their hulls in visible patterns, creating an almost artistic display of power and sophistication. Look at your ships, Captain Shin continued. Really look at them. Each one is powered by a quantum fusion core that generates enough energy to power a small planet. They're equipped with weapons that can crack asteroids, shields that can deflect stellar radiation, and sensors that can detect a single photon from across a star system. The representatives nodded, their pride in their technological achievements evident. So tell me, the human said, his voice taking on a harder edge, why does a ship capable of cracking asteroids need help from another ship to destroy an enemy vessel? The question struck the assembled beings like a physical blow. Admiral Zethkar's forearms moved restlessly as he struggled to formulate a response. Our formations aren't just about firepower, the Crothry Admiral said finally. They're about coordination, about presenting a unified front that can't be divided and conquered. Captain Shin smiled grimly. Unified? That's an interesting word. Let me show you something. He called up recent battle footage from the Void Hunter attacks. The display showed Council fleets in their traditional formations, beautiful, synchronized, and ultimately doomed. The human slowed the playback and highlighted specific moments. Watch this engagement from the Kepler incident. Your fleet maintains perfect formation even as the Void Hunters begin their attack. Every ship adjusts its position to maintain the integrity of the defensive matrix. The assembled beings watched their own forces move with mechanical precision, following protocols that had been refined over centuries. It was indeed a beautiful sight. Dozens of massive warships moving in perfect harmony, their defensive fields creating a shimmering barrier against the darkness of space. Now watch what happens when the first ship is destroyed, Captain Chun continued. The display showed a Void Hunter vessel materializing within the Council formation, its crude weaponry somehow penetrating the quantum shields of a heavy cruiser. As the ship exploded, something unexpected happened. The surrounding vessels immediately moved to close the gap, maintaining their formation even as debris and energy cascaded around them. They prioritized formation integrity over tactical response, Captain Chin observed. Instead of pursuing the attacking ship or adapting to the new threat, they followed protocol. They filled the hole. Of course they did, Commander Valterra protested. Maintaining formation cohesion is fundamental to space warfare. Without it, we become a scattered mob. Do you, Captain Chin asked, or do you become individual predators instead of a herd? The alien terminology was unfamiliar, but the translation systems conveyed the meaning clearly enough. The human was suggesting something that went against every principle of organized warfare. What you're describing is chaos, General Thok growled. Individual ships acting without coordination, without unified command structure. That's not warfare. That's barbarism. Captain Chin nodded thoughtfully. You know, my species had similar ideas for a long time. We fought in formations, two tight, disciplined groups that moved and acted as one. We thought it made us stronger. He paused, studying the faces around him. Then, we learned better. The human called up new data, historical records from Earth's military development. The display showed primitive spacecraft, crude by galactic standards, but arranged in loose, seemingly chaotic formations. Human military doctrine evolved differently than yours, Captain Shin explained. We learned that rigid formations, while providing mutual support, also provide mutual vulnerability. When you tie your ships together with overlapping fields and coordinated movements, you don't just share strength, you share weaknesses. Admiral Zethkar's primary eyes focused intently on the human data. Your formations appear random, undisciplined. They're not random, Captain Shin corrected. They're adaptive. Each ship operates independently while maintaining awareness of the larger battlefield. When one vessel is threatened, it doesn't rely on formation integrity. It relies on its own capabilities and the independent support of nearby allies. But that requires individual ship commanders to make tactical decisions without central coordination. The crystalline resonant representative chimed in discord. The complexity would be overwhelming. Captain Chin's expression grew serious. Would it be liberating? He manipulated the display again, showing human fleet exercises. The ships moved in what appeared to be complete disorder, yet somehow they consistently outperformed computer simulations of council tactics. The key is training your commanders to think independently, the human explained. Instead of following predetermined patterns, they learn to read the battlefield, adapt to changing circumstances, and trust their own judgment. Impossible, General Thok rumbled. Space combat happens too fast for individual decision-making. Formations exist because they provide predictable, tested responses to tactical situations. Do they? Captain Shin asked. Let me ask you something else. In your formations, how long does it take for a tactical order to travel from the fleet commander to the ships on the periphery? Admiral Zethkar considered the question. Approximately 2.3 seconds through our quantum communication network. And how long does it take a Void Hunter ship to materialize, fire, and disappear? The silence that followed was answer enough. The Void Hunters struck faster than the Council's command structure could respond. Your formations aren't just predictable, Captain Shin said quietly. They're slow. By the time your fleet commander identifies a threat and transmits orders, the attack is already over. He gestured to the battle recordings again. Look at your losses. Not just ships destroyed, but opportunities missed. How many times did individual council vessels have clear shots at Void Hunter ships, but couldn't take them because they were waiting for orders? How many times could a ship have evaded attack by breaking formation, but didn't because protocol demanded they hold position? The question struck home with devastating accuracy. Each representative began recalling battles where similar scenarios had played out exactly as the human described. What you're suggesting goes against everything we've learned about warfare, Commander Valterra said, but her voice lacked conviction. Captain Shin nodded sympathetically. I know, it goes against everything we learned too, but sometimes survival requires abandoning what we think we know. He paused, letting his words sink in before asking the question that would change everything. So, I'll ask you again, why are your warships vulnerable? Is it because they're weak individually, or is it because you've made them weak by tying them together? The weight of Captain Chin's question settled over the war room like a heavy blanket. For the first time in recorded council history, the representatives of 12 advanced civilizations found themselves questioning the fundamental principles of their military doctrine. Admiral Zethkar was the first to break the silence, his voice carrying a tremor that hadn't been there before. You're asking us to abandon 3,000 years of proven tactical evolution. Our formations have won countless conflicts against enemies who fought the same way you do, Captain Shun replied gently. The Void Hunters don't follow your rules. They've adapted to exploit your strengths. The question is, can you adapt to exploit theirs? The human moved to a different section of the holographic display, calling up detailed scans of Void Hunter vessels. The ships were indeed crude by Council standards, asymmetrical hulls cobbled together from salvage materials, weapons that appeared to be jury-rigged from mining equipment, and energy signatures that fluctuated wildly. Look at their ships, Captain Shun continued. No two are exactly alike. No standardized designs, no uniform capabilities. By your standards, they should be hopelessly outclassed. They are outclassed, General Thok growled. Any single council vessel could destroy 3 of their ships in direct combat. Exactly, Captain Shin smiled. So why are they winning? He manipulated the display to show the energy patterns of Void Hunter attacks. Instead of the smooth, coordinated signatures of council weapons, the data revealed something far more chaotic. Overlapping fields of disruption that seemed to cascade and amplify each other. They're not trying to outgun you, the human explained. They're using their apparent weakness as a strength. Those inconsistent energy signatures, they make it impossible for your targeting systems to achieve weapon locks. The salvage components, they create electromagnetic noise that interferes with your sensors. The asymmetrical designs, they make it difficult to predict their movement patterns. Commander Velterra leaned forward, studying the data with growing interest. You're saying their technological inferiority is actually an advantage? I'm saying they've learned to fight asymmetrically, Captain Shin replied. While you've been perfecting formations and standardizing tactics, they've been learning to be unpredictable. Every battle teaches them something new about your capabilities, while teaching you nothing about theirs. The crystalline resonant representative chimed in harmonic infusion. But surely chaos cannot defeat order indefinitely. There must be patterns to their behavior. Captain Shin nodded. There are patterns, but not the kind your tactical computers are designed to recognize. Watch this. He displayed a series of Void Hunter attacks, each one slightly different from the last. To the assembled representatives, they appeared random, almost desperate. But as the human highlighted specific elements, a different picture emerged. They're learning, he said simply. Every attack is an experiment. They try different approaches, observe your responses, and adapt their next assault accordingly. Your formations provide them with consistent data to analyze, while their chaotic attacks provide you with inconsistent data to respond to. Admiral Zethkar's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed this information. Are you suggesting we abandon military discipline entirely? That we fight like barbarians? I'm suggesting you fight like predators instead of prey, Captain Shin replied, his voice taking on an edge that hadn't been there before. Your formations make you predictable. They make you slow. They make you vulnerable. The Void Hunters have figured this out, and they're using it to destroy you one fleet at a time. The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. Everything they had built, every tactical innovation they had developed over millennia, had become a weakness to be exploited. But without formations, how do we coordinate our forces? Asked the ethereal Lumina representative, its form flickering with agitation. How do we concentrate firepower? How do we provide mutual support? Captain Shun smiled, and for the first time, there was something predatory in that expression. You've been thinking about this backwards. You don't need to coordinate your forces. You need to coordinate your objectives. He gestured to the tactical display, which now showed human fleet exercises in real time. The ships moved independently, yet somehow they consistently achieved their mission goals with minimal losses. Human doctrine focuses on mission accomplishment rather than formation maintenance, the captain explained. Each ship commander understands the objective and is trained to pursue it using their best judgment. They don't wait for orders, they create opportunities. But that could lead to chaos, General Thok protested. Ships firing on the same target, movements that interfere with each other, complete breakdown of command authority. Could it? Captain Shin asked. Or could it lead to something else? He called up a specific exercise, a human fleet engagement against simulated council formations. The display showed 12 human ships facing off against 36 council vessels in perfect formation. By every measure of military science, the humans should have been annihilated. Instead, they won decisively. Watch how it unfolds, Captain Shin narrated. The council formation moves to engage, following standard doctrine. The human ships scatter immediately, abandoning any pretense of formation integrity. The assembled beings watched in fascination as the human vessels spread across the battlefield like drops of mercury, each one moving independently, yet somehow maintaining awareness of the others. Individual ships began engaging targets of opportunity. The human continued. No central coordination, no predeterminede targeting priorities. Each commander chooses their own approach based on battlefield conditions and their ship's capabilities. The result was devastating. The Council formation, designed to provide mutual support and overlapping fields of fire, found itself unable to respond effectively to the scattered human assault. Ships that turned to engage one attacker exposed themselves to fire from another. Attempts to maintain formation integrity left vessels isolated and vulnerable. Your formation's greatest strength, mutual support, became its greatest weakness, Captain Chen observed. Ships couldn't break formation to pursue attackers without compromising their neighbors. They couldn't adapt to changing circumstances without disrupting the overall pattern. Commander Velterra's voice was barely a whisper. They turned our own doctrine against us. Not just your doctrine, the human replied. Your thinking. You become so focused on protecting your ships that you've forgotten how to use them as weapons. He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. Every ship in a council fleet is capable of operating independently. Your captains are skilled, your crews are trained, your technology is superior. But you've tied them all together in formations that make them predictable, slow, and vulnerable. Admiral Zethkar's forearms moved restlessly as he struggled with concepts that challenged everything he believed about warfare. What you're describing isn't military science. It's gambling. Chaos. No, Captain Chen said firmly. It's evolution. The Void Hunters forced you to evolve or die. The question is, which will you choose? The human manipulated the display one final time, showing side-by-side comparisons of council and human tactical doctrines. The differences were stark. Rigid formations versus adaptive clusters, centralized command versus distributed decision-making, predictable patterns versus chaotic improvisation. Your formations work perfectly, Captain Chen said quietly, against enemies who fight the same way you do. But the Void Hunters don't fight fair. They don't follow rules. They don't respect your tactical elegance. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each representative. They fight to win. The question is, do you? The silence stretched on, filled with the weight of impossible decisions. Finally, Commander Velterra spoke, her voice carrying a note of desperate curiosity. If we were to experiment with your approach, how would we begin? How does one abandon 3 millennia of military tradition? Captain Chen's smile returned, but now it carried a different quality, not predatory, but encouraging. You start by asking the right questions. Not how do we protect our ships, but how do we use our ships? Not how do we maintain formation, but how do we accomplish our mission? He gestured to the tactical display. Your ships are individually more powerful than anything the Void Hunters can field. Your captains are more skilled, your technology more advanced. You have every advantage except one. Which is? Admiral Zethkar asked. The willingness to use those advantages, Captain Chen replied. You've been fighting with one hand tied behind your back, constrained by formations and protocols that make you predictable. The Void Hunters have been fighting with both hands free, adapting and evolving with every encounter. The human paused, studying the faces around him. I can show you how to untie that hand. But first, you need to decide if you're willing to let go of everything you think you know about warfare. The question hung in the air, demanding an answer that would reshape the future of galactic conflict. For the first time in Council history, the path forward was uncertain, chaotic, and absolutely necessary. Admiral Zethkar's primary eyes closed as he struggled with a decision that would either save the Council or destroy everything they had built. When he opened them again, there was something new there, not acceptance but desperate curiosity. Show us, he said simply. Captain Chen nodded and activated his personal communicator. This is Captain Chen to Terran Fleet Command. Authorization Omega 77. I need immediate simulation access to Council tactical networks. Within moments, the War Room's displays flickered and changed. Instead of the elegant Council interface, raw human tactical data flooded the projectors. The change was jarring. Where Council systems showed smooth, artistic representations of space combat, the human displays were stark, utilitarian, and brutally direct. "First lesson," Captain Shin said, his voice taking on the tone of an instructor. "Your tactical displays are beautiful, but beauty can be a distraction. Human systems prioritize information density over aesthetic appeal. The assembled beings studied the human interface with a mixture of fascination and confusion. Where Council displays showed graceful arcs representing ship movements, human screens showed probability cones, threat assessments, and real-time tactical options. It was chaos to eyes trained on Council elegance, but undeniably information-rich. "I don't understand half of what I'm seeing," Commander Volterra admitted, her gill slits fluttering with confusion. "That's because you're still thinking in formation terms," Captain Shin replied. "Look at this section." He highlighted a cluster of rapidly changing data streams. "This isn't showing you where your ships are. It's showing you where they could be in the next 30 seconds. General Thok leaned forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the displays. "Predictive positioning? But that assumes commanders will make optimal tactical choices." "No," the human corrected. "It assumes commanders will make human choices. Watch." He initiated a simulation, a recreation of the recent Void Hunter victory at the Proxima Defense Grid. The display showed the actual battle as it had unfolded, with Council forces maintaining their traditional formations as Void Hunter ships materialized and struck with devastating effect. "Now watch the same scenario with human tactical doctrine," Captain Shin said, resetting the simulation. This time, the Council ships scattered immediately upon detecting the first Void Hunter signature. Individual vessels moved independently, creating a chaotic dance of metal and energy that bore no resemblance to traditional space warfare. The result was stunning. Instead of the devastating defeat that had actually occurred, the simulation showed a complete reversal. Void Hunter ships finding themselves unable to predict target locations, their phase attacks striking empty space as Council vessels moved unpredictably through three-dimensional space. "Impossible," Admiral Zethkar breathed. "The formation breakdown should have made our ships vulnerable to concentrated fire." "From what?" Captain Shin asked pointedly. "The Void Hunters don't use concentrated fire. They use hit-and-run tactics. Your formations provided them with concentrated targets. Individual ships moving independently provide them with what?" The answer hung in the air, unspoken but understood. "Nothing." The Void Hunter tactical advantage evaporated when faced with targets that refused to be predictable. "But our captains aren't trained for this," the crystalline resonant chimed in harmonic concern. "Our entire command structure is built around centralized coordination." Captain Shin smiled grimly. "Then we retrain them. But first, let me show you something about your captains that might surprise you." He accessed Council personnel files, displaying service records for the fleet commanders who had fought against the Void Hunters. The data was impressive: centuries of experience, advanced tactical training, commendations for innovation, and leadership. "Your captains are some of the finest military minds in the galaxy," the human observed. "But you've been using them as relay stations for central command decisions. You've taken brilliant tacticians and turned them into order followers." Admiral Zethkar's mandibles clicked with uncomfortable recognition. "Military discipline requires adherence to command structure. Without it, we have chaos." "Do you?" Captain Chun challenged. "Let me ask you something personal, Admiral. In your first command, before you learned Council doctrine, what was your instinct when faced with an unexpected threat?" The Crotheri's forearms moved restlessly as he considered the question. I would assess the situation and respond based on my judgment of the tactical requirements. And if that response required breaking formation?" A long pause. "I would break formation if it meant saving my ship and crew." "Exactly," Captain Shin said triumphantly. "You had the right instincts. Then military doctrine trained them out of you. It taught you that formation integrity was more important than tactical advantage." The human gestured to the simulation displays, which now showed dozens of different scenarios, each one demonstrating how rigid formations created vulnerabilities that adaptive tactics could exploit. Your doctrine worked for thousands of years because your enemies shared the same limitations, he continued. They fought in formations too, so your formations were optimized to counter theirs. But the Void Hunters don't fight fair. They've created a new paradigm, and your old paradigm can't counter it. Commander Volterra studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. You're saying we need to become unpredictable. I'm saying you need to become adaptive, Captain Chen corrected. Unpredictability for its own sake is just chaos. But adaptability, the ability to change tactics based on battlefield conditions, that's evolution. He called up training scenarios from human military academies, showing young officers learning to command individual ships in complex, ever-changing situations. Human tactical training focuses on decision-making under uncertainty, the captain explained. We don't teach our officers to follow predetermined patterns. We teach them to read the battlefield, identify opportunities, and act on their best judgment. But what about coordination? General Thok asked. How do you prevent friendly fire incidents? How do you concentrate firepower when needed? Captain Chen's expression grew serious. Through communication and shared objectives, not rigid positioning. Watch this. He displayed a human fleet exercise where 12 ships faced a simulated enemy force 3 times their size. Instead of maintaining formation, the human vessels scattered across the battlefield, but not randomly. Each ship maintained constant communication with its neighbors, sharing targeting data, threat assessments, and tactical opportunities. Individual initiative, collective awareness, the human narrated. Each captain makes their own tactical decisions, but they do so with full knowledge of what their allies are doing. The result was beautiful in its chaos. Ships moving independently, yet somehow coordinating their attacks, creating crossfires and tactical opportunities that no central commander could have orchestrated. It's like a pack hunt, Commander Volterra breathed, the translation systems struggling with the unfamiliar concept. Exactly, Captain Chen smiled. Wolves don't maintain formation when hunting. They scatter, adapt, and coordinate through instinct and communication. Each wolf acts independently, but they all share the same objective. Admiral Zethkar was quiet for long moments, studying the human tactical displays with intense concentration. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying a weight of difficult decision. The casualties during this transition period, he said carefully, how many ships would we lose while our captains learn these new tactics? Captain Chen's expression sobered. Some, he admitted, change is never without cost. But the question isn't how many ships you'll lose learning to fight differently. The question is how many you'll lose if you don't. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of impossible choices. Then, Commander Volterra spoke, her voice carrying a note of desperate determination. How long would it take to retrain our captains to implement these new tactics? For basic proficiency? 6 months of intensive training, Captain Chen replied. For true expertise? Years. But you don't have years. Then what do you suggest? Admiral Zethkar asked. The human smile returned, but now it carried something else, the confidence of someone who had thought through every angle. We start with volunteer crews, he said. Ships whose captains are willing to abandon everything they know and learn to fight like predators instead of prey. We train them in human tactics, then use them as a rapid response force against the next Void Hunter attack. He paused, meeting each representative's eyes in turn. If it works, we expand the program. If it fails, he shrugged. You'll be no worse off than you are now. General Thok growled low in his throat. You're asking us to stake everything on an improving concept. I'm asking you to stake everything on your own captains, Captain Chen corrected. Your ships are superior. Your crews are skilled. Your technology is advanced. The only thing holding you back is your refusal to use these advantages effectively. The war room fell silent once more as 12 species contemplated a future that challenged everything they believed about warfare, civilization, and the nature of military power itself. Finally, Admiral Zethkar spoke, his voice carrying the weight of decision that would reshape galactic history. "Captain Shun," he said formally, "the Galactic Council hereby requests your assistance in developing new tactical doctrines for our fleet. Will you accept the position of strategic advisor?" The human smile was predatory and reassuring at the same time. "Admiral, I'd be honored to teach your captains how to hunt." 3 months later, the Galactic Council faced its moment of truth. The Void Hunters had struck again, this time targeting the core system of Vega Prime with a fleet larger than any previously encountered. Emergency protocols activated across the galaxy as the Council's fastest response ships raced toward the battle zone. Captain Shun stood on the bridge of the hybrid command vessel Synthesis, surrounded by representatives from the volunteer program that had consumed every waking moment since that fateful meeting in the war room. Around him, officers from 12 different species worked at stations that blended human tactical philosophy with Council technology in ways that had seemed impossible just months before. "Contact established," announced Lieutenant Commander Volterra, her gill slits now steady with confidence rather than fluttering with nervousness. "Void Hunter fleet composition, 47 vessels of various configurations. They're beginning their phase attacks on the civilian evacuation ships." Admiral Zethkar, now serving as operational commander of the Experimental Rapid Response Force, turned to Captain Shun with eyes that held both trust and uncertainty. The traditional response would be to form defensive formations around the evacuation fleet. And the human response? Captain Shin asked, though both of them already knew the answer. "We hunt," the Admiral replied, and there was something new in his voice, the confidence of a predator rather than the caution of prey. The tactical display showed the Void Hunter fleet in their typical chaotic arrangement, phase shifting in and out of normal space as they harried the fleeing civilian vessels. Below them, the evacuation fleet maintained tight protective formations, their shields overlapping in the traditional Council defensive pattern. "All ships," Admiral Zethkar broadcast on the fleet frequency, his voice carrying across 36 vessels crewed by volunteers who had abandoned everything they'd learned about space warfare. "Initiate scatter protocol. Captains, you have your objectives. Hunt well." What followed would be remembered as the moment galactic warfare changed forever. The Council fleet dissolved. Ships that had trained for millennia to maintain perfect formations suddenly spread across three-dimensional space like a cloud of deadly insects, each vessel moving independently according to its captain's judgment of battlefield conditions. It was chaos by every traditional standard, and it was beautiful. The Void Hunters, expecting the familiar sight of neat Council formations, found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Truly unpredictable opponents. Captain Tvel of the Crothery Heavy Cruiser Stalwart's Pride was the first to engage, her ship materializing from its phase jump directly behind a Void Hunter vessel that had expected to find empty space. Her weapons, no longer constrained by formation firing patterns, unleashed their full fury at point-blank range. "Target eliminated," she reported with savage satisfaction, pursuing secondary objectives. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as Council captains discovered the terrifying joy of hunting as individuals rather than components of a larger machine. Ships that had spent decades learning to support their neighbors were suddenly free to exploit their own technological superiority without compromise. General Thok's massive dreadnought, Ursine Fury, demonstrated the principle most dramatically. Instead of maintaining position as the center of a defensive formation, the great ship moved like a creature from primitive mythology, a bear in space, using its incredible mass and firepower to charge directly at enemy clusters, scattering them like leaves before returning to prowl the edges of the battle zone. "This is unorthodox," General Thok rumbled over the comm, but his tone carried pure satisfaction. "I have never felt so alive in combat." The Void Hunters, masters of adaptation, tried to adjust their tactics to counter this new chaos. They attempted to concentrate their forces against isolated Council vessels, only to find that isolation in the new tactical paradigm was an illusion. Ships that appeared to be alone were actually nodes in a dynamic network of mutual awareness, ready to support each other without the vulnerabilities of fixed formations. Commander Valterra, now captain of the modified destroyer Wave Dancer, demonstrated this principle when 3 Void Hunter ships materialized around her position in a classic pincer attack. In the old doctrine, she would have called for formation support and attempted to maintain position until help arrived. Instead, she accelerated directly toward the largest enemy ship while broadcasting targeting data to nearby allies. Her unexpected charge threw off the enemy timing, while 2 other Council vessels converged on her position from angles the Void Hunters hadn't anticipated. The pincer became a trap, but not for the ship they had intended to catch. Target cluster eliminated, Valterra reported with aquatic equivalent of satisfaction. Reforming for independent patrol. Captain Shin watched the battle unfold with mixed emotions. Pride at seeing the effectiveness of human tactical doctrine, but also a kind of melancholy at witnessing the end of an era. The elegant formations that had defined Council warfare for millennia were disappearing, replaced by something more effective but undeniably more savage. Void Hunter fleet is withdrawing, Admiral Zethkar reported, his 4 arms working frantically at tactical stations as he struggled to maintain awareness of 36 independently operating ships. They're retreating. The words carried in weight of disbelief that echoed across the fleet frequency. The Void Hunters had never retreated before. They fought until destruction or victory, their nomadic nature making retreat meaningless. But faced with prey that had learned to become predators, they were pulling back into phase space and disappearing. "Should we pursue?" General Thok asked, his voice carrying the hungry eagerness of a successful hunt. "Negative," Captain Chin intervened. "Let them go. They need to survive to carry the message back to their main fleet." Admiral Zethkar turned to look at the human with confusion. "Message? That the prey has learned to hunt," Captain Shan replied quietly. "That the old rules no longer apply. That the Galactic Council is no longer the predictable target they thought it was." In the aftermath of the battle, as ships began the careful process of returning to something resembling traditional formations for the journey home, the magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. Not a single Council vessel had been destroyed. Casualties were minimal. The Void Hunters, for the first time in their war of conquest, had been forced to retreat. But more than that, something fundamental had changed in the way Council species thought about themselves and their place in the galaxy. "The formations we use today," Admiral Zethkar said slowly, studying the battle recordings, "they weren't really formations at all, were they?" "No," Captain Chin agreed. "They were expressions of individual capability coordinated toward common objectives. Your ships fought like they were designed to fight, as independent platforms of enormous capability rather than components in a larger machine." Commander Valterra, reviewing her own ship's performance data, shook her head in amazement. "The response times, the tactical flexibility, we accomplish things today that would have been impossible in traditional formations. Because you stopped trying to be something you weren't," the human explained. "You stopped trying to be a monolithic force and started being what you actually are, a collection of superior ships crewed by brilliant individuals." The implications rippled outward from the battle zone as news of the victory spread. Across the galaxy, Council military academies began revising training protocols that had remained unchanged for centuries. Fleet commanders who had built their careers on formation warfare found themselves studying human tactical manuals. Engineers began designing ships optimized for independent operation rather than formation integration. The Void Hunters, meanwhile, found themselves facing an entirely new strategic reality. The predictable prey they had been systematically harvesting had evolved into something far more dangerous. Predators who fought with the intelligence of advanced civilization and the instincts of apex hunters. Admiral Zethkar stood in his ready room hours after the battle, studying star charts that showed Void Hunter activity across the galaxy. The pattern of expansion that had seemed unstoppable just months before was already beginning to change as news of the new tactic spread. "They'll adapt," he said as Captain Shin joined him at the strategic display. "The Void Hunters survived as nomads by adapting to every challenge. They'll find ways to counter our new tactics." The human nodded thoughtfully. "Probably. But so will you. That's the point. You've stopped being predictable. Every engagement will be different now because your captains are thinking instead of following patterns. It feels—" The Admiral paused, searching for words to describe a sensation that had no precedent in Crothery military experience. "Liberating. And terrifying. Evolution usually is," Captain Shin agreed. "You've given up the certainty of formation warfare for the uncertainty of adaptive combat. It's scarier, but it's also more honest." "Honest." The human gestured toward the tactical displays, still showing the aftermath of the battle. "Your ships were always this capable. Your crews were always this skilled. You just convinced yourself that you needed to limit that capability for the sake of order and predictability." He paused, studying the alien face across from him. "The question now is whether the rest of the Council can make the same evolution." Admiral Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned to recognize as determined resolve. "They'll have to. We can't go back to the old ways. Not after seeing what we're truly capable of." As if summoned by his words, the communications system activated with an incoming message from Council Central Command. Admiral Zethkar accepted the transmission, and the holographic form of Fleet Admiral Karath materialized in the ready room. "Admiral Zethkar," the senior officer began, "preliminary reports from your engagement are extraordinary. The Council leadership is requesting immediate implementation of your new tactical protocols across all fleet elements." "Understood, sir," Zethkar replied. "But I should note that this isn't simply a matter of new formations or updated firing patterns. This represents a fundamental change in how we think about space warfare itself." Fleet Admiral Karath's expression grew serious. "Explain." Zethkar glanced at Captain Chun, who nodded encouragingly. "Sir, we've learned that our greatest weakness wasn't our technology or our training. It was our assumption that order and predictability represented strength. The humans have shown us that true strength comes from the ability to adapt, to think independently, and to trust in individual capability rather than collective limitation." The holographic fleet admiral was quiet for long moments, processing implications that reached far beyond military doctrine. Finally, he spoke. "Admiral, you're talking about more than tactical changes. You're talking about cultural revolution." "Yes, sir," Zethkar replied without hesitation. "We are." Another long pause. Then, Fleet Admiral Karath did something unprecedented in Council military history. He smiled with genuine predatory satisfaction. "Then, let's revolutionize, Admiral. The galaxy is about to learn that the Galactic Council has remembered how to hunt." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Zethkar and Captain Shin alone with the weight of changes that would reshape galactic civilization. Outside the viewport, stars that had witnessed 3 millennia of ordered, predictable warfare now looked down upon something new, a civilization that had chosen evolution over tradition, adaptation over certainty, and the dangerous freedom of individual excellence over the comfortable limitations of collective mediocrity. The room had fallen silent when the human asked his question about vulnerability. Now, in the aftermath of its answer, the galaxy itself held its breath as an entirely new era of warfare began. The hunters had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same.